Broadcasting from beautiful, tropical Vero Beach, Florida, it's Money Nation with Ed Gardner. Now here is your host of Money Nation, Ed Gardner.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Money Nation. Today we've got Adam Koh. Adam is the Editorial Director from Cannabis Benchmarks. It's a division of New Leaf Capital. He's the author, writes the premium Cannabis Benchmark reports. Adam originally is from the Philadelphia area, went to the University of Delaware and moved out to Colorado in 2013. And he's been in various aspects of the industry since then. Adam, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate you having me on.
I'm friends with Ian, one of the co-founders. Why don't you tell me about why Ian and the other co-founder formed New Leaf, and what were their visions and thoughts of the business?
Sure. So I guess the first thing is that New Leaf and our Cannabis Benchmarks and our Hemp Benchmarks divisions are independent price reporting agencies. So we're really just treating cannabis and hemp and derivative products like any other commodity, corn, soybeans, oil and gas, et cetera. And they were coming from that space, actually, commodity price reporting. And when they originally looked to get into the cannabis industry, they were looking at different investment opportunities and realized that there really weren't any validated price assessments to back up some of these business plans and assumptions that people were pitching. So long story short, they really saw that as a crucial need for the industry and saw that as their opportunity to enter. And for myself personally, I was working as I was managing a cultivation facility in the Denver area, and I turned to consulting after that. And, I really just saw the value proposition in the business because it was very hard to negotiate wholesale prices when you did not have any data. It was really just people throwing darts at a dartboard and throwing out numbers, and really that's no way to run a business. So I thought it was a really good fit and a really big need for the industry.
So the big companies, they subscribe to your newsletter and reports to find out what pricing should be throughout the country?
Correct. Yeah, we've over the years built up what we call our price contributor network. We have licensed businesses, trade associations, consultants, et cetera, feeding us data weekly, monthly. And I'm not the number cruncher myself, but we aggregate that and, according to industry standards for other commodity price reporting companies. And yeah, it's a subscription service weekly for our Cannabis Benchmarks division, monthly for Hemp Benchmarks. And yeah, all different types of subscribers, from businesses directly in the industry to regulators to consultants to banks, et cetera.
Are you companies both in the United States and Canada?
Yes. So, as your listeners are probably aware, Canada legalized cannabis federally. Sales began in 2018. We've been reporting on prices in the Canadian market since then as well. We began with the US market. And then with the legalization of hemp, that's nationwide and also international. There's Canada has an over 20-year-old hemp industry. There's hemp grown in China, Europe, and things are springing up more in places like South America and Africa as well.
Now, what metrics do you guys use? Do you just use total, like pounds sold divided by the price? Is that how you come up with some of your data? Or
yeah, well, the Cannabis Benchmarks division, we offer official wholesale price assessments for cannabis flower and also trim and plant material used to make extracts for certain states. It's a volume weighted average, which is pretty important because, and we might get into this more down the line, but in some places like out in the Western states, you have outdoor cultivation, and there's typically a big harvest that comes in around October, November at the end of the year. So, it's important to have a volume weighted average to account for the, fluctuations in supply and the different cultivation types and things like that.
Let's talk about the big news in New York and New Jersey. It's the legalization that just went through. What are your thoughts about that, and how do you see that rolling out?
Yeah, well, it's very big news. It's very exciting. But I think the rollout itself is going to be a process. Both states are starting from fairly small, fairly tightly controlled medical cannabis programs. For example, in New York, there's only 10 licenses. I believe there's not quite 40 dispensary storefronts open. It's a relatively small market to build from. It's going to take some time to get there, but there's also the fact that in both states you have presence of large multi-state operators is the typical lingo in the cannabis industry. So they're well-funded operations. They have experience building out in other states, so that's going to help things along. But it will take some time because obviously there's a huge population base in both states, and then as well as the surrounding states that have not legalized yet, like Pennsylvania, you're going to have some additional demand coming over the border. So it's going to take some time for the businesses to build out their production capacity, build out their retail footprint, and after that happens, we'll really start to see some big sales numbers roll in, I think, and we've seen that in Illinois as a bit of a predecessor.
Obviously, there's medical marijuana already in New York and New Jersey. How long until you'll see retail dispensaries?
So New Jersey, there's still not a definite timeline yet for either state. The legislation's been signed into law in both places, but now it has to go to the state regulatory bodies for a rulemaking process, and they're going to lay out a timeline for licensing, accepting applications, approving applications, and then ultimately getting the stores going. So right now we just really have ballpark estimates, and I think for New Jersey, they're hoping to see sales, the adult use market open up for sales to consumers maybe in early 2022. And then New York maybe sometime shortly after that.
Interesting. How does the legalization affect the price of cannabis?
Well, initially, I'll give you a two-part answer here. Initially, it pushes it up in the legal market because you have a situation where the demand is there already, right? I mean, people are purchasing cannabis, they're using cannabis in New York and New Jersey, they're just not doing it from licensed and regulated businesses. So the demand is there, but like I mentioned, the production takes time to catch up. So you initially have a bit of an imbalance on the demand side that helps to push up prices. And then with legalization also comes licensing fees, taxes, other compliance costs, et cetera. So, those are things that the businesses are going to pass on to the consumers as naturally every business does. The second part of my answer, longer term though, what we've seen is legalization really can bring down the price to levels that it never fell to in illegal markets. And really some of the reasons for that are just competition, innovation, and the ability to produce at scale, which, for example, if you are operating in an illegal market, you're not going to have a huge 200,000 square foot facility. You're not going to be growing on 5 acres or anything like that because you don't want to get caught. So legalization does afford some, characteristics to businesses that can help them push the price down over time.
Interesting. Do you see much price difference from the East Coast to the West Coast? I mean, the West Coast is like maybe a little more outdoor growing. In California, is it more expensive to grow cannabis and hemp in the Northeast?
Yeah, there are absolutely price differences east to west. The outdoor does have a lot to do with it. The outdoor and the greenhouse cultivation that's more prevalent in the Western states, you have a lower cost of production, so you can offer a lower wholesale and retail price naturally. And then there's just the features of each individual market. Just to paint with a broad brush a bit, in the East Coast states, you tend to have a little more restrictive licensing regimes. They just don't allow as many, in some places there are state level caps, so they just don't allow as many businesses to enter the market. So that creates a little less competition compared to a state such as Oregon or Colorado, where there are hundreds of businesses, competing, rather than a state like Massachusetts or Illinois, where there are dozens.
When do you think you'll see like cross-state sales? Is that you need total federal legalization before you will have one state, or can one, let's say you had two states that are both legal, can they buy and sell from each other, or not yet?
No, they cannot yet. There's going to be, and people aren't quite sure what form that might take, but it will take some sort of federal action, whether it's descheduling or decriminalization. Like I said, that there's a bit of uncertainty there. But yeah, we do need the go-ahead from the federal government before states can sell between each other. But there are some states, like Oregon, for example, are already making preparations. They actually, in a prior year, passed a law that said once federal conditions allow, it gave them the regulatory infrastructure to set up agreements with other states for export and import.
Great. Adam, we're going to take a quick break here. Remember, listeners, any questions at all about your portfolio investments, recently retired, please give me a call. And you can also email me at edgardner@cutterco.com. We'll be right back with more from Money Nation.
All opinions expressed by Ed Gardner and or his guests on the Money Nation show are solely Ed Gardner's and or his guests' opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Cutter & Company or any of their affiliates. You should not treat any opinion expressed by Ed Gardner and or guests as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or follow a particular strategy, but only in as an expression of their opinion. Ed Gardner's and his guests' opinions are based on information he considers reliable, but neither Cutter & Company nor affiliates and or subsidies warrant its completeness or accuracy, and it should not be relied upon as such. Always talk to your financial advisor before making such decisions.
Welcome back to Money Nation. Adam, with the federal legalization to come at some point in time, would you see prices come down overall when states can buy and sell from each other?
Well, it's a multifaceted question, I have to say, but over time, I think you would. Maybe initially, similar to state-by-state legalization, you might see prices getting pushed up. So, for example, if you're a big farm on the West Coast, you're used to supplying your in-state market right now. And then if demand opens up in the Dakotas and the Deep South and the Midwest, places that don't have legalization, you have that demand coming and pressuring your supply right away. So, there might be a little catch-up period where prices do get a bump upwards, but over time, I think we'll see the most efficient operators and we'll see competition push prices down once federal legalization does occur.
Is the market prices basically just come down to supply and demand in different states, or are there other factors that influence?
I think at the end of the day, it does come down to supply and demand, but there are a ton of different factors that can shape supply and demand, if that makes sense. We talked about some states only allow a certain number of licenses, and sometimes that's a fairly limited number. So, that can decrease competition and increase consolidation, and also just decrease supply because 10 businesses, for example, can only produce so much. And then, in a place like New York and California is dealing with this as well, you have the demand side being shaped by a pretty entrenched illegal market. Cannabis is obviously being bought and sold in New York. There's delivery services in Manhattan where you can reportedly, I can't say I know this in person, but reportedly get pretty much any type of cannabis product delivered to your door already. So, that demand is being satisfied and taken away from the legal licensed businesses at this time. Eventually, when the legal product becomes convenient enough and price competitive enough, it can start to take demand from the illegal sellers, and that's what we're seeing out west in the more mature markets. But yeah, it comes down to supply and demand at the end of the day, but market structure, existing illegal the presence of the existing illegal market and factors like that can sort of shape those and also change over time.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question about the difference in pricing from legal markets to black markets. How much is the difference, and does anyone follow or track that?
Well, for the illegal market, we do not track that, but in general, I think it's safe to say that, especially in newer legal cannabis markets, the black market price is typically lower. When you're an illicit business, you don't pay taxes, you're not paying your licensing fee, you're not even sometimes paying rent on a storefront thing, all that overhead you can really minimize in the illicit realm, which can give you an advantage on price. But what we've seen over time, I mentioned just a minute ago about the legal market taking increasing share of the total market, legal and illegal in the more mature states, and that happens when the legal market becomes convenient. If you have a lot of storefronts proliferating or delivery services that can bring product to your door, a lot of times consumers will opt for that route just because it's easier, it's safer. You don't have to deal with sort of the uncertainty of doing something illegal. And then the legal market, the price is a little higher, but it can also bring benefits like tested products. You're purchasing something, how much THC is in it, it's been tested for pesticides and other contaminants, et cetera. That's not something that the illegal market can offer. So, over time, initially it can be tough for legal sellers to compete with the illegal market, but over time we're seeing the legal market take an increasing share of total cannabis demand, both in the US and in Canada.
Makes sense. Next, let's talk about CBD. CBD is exploding throughout the country, helping people from everything from sleep disorders to pain to anxiety. I've got a good friend of mine, Jason, who owns the Crisp Cannoli. It's actually a bakery in outside of Albany. And he had some knee pain a couple of years ago when he started to take CBD, and the knee pain went away. And he's a big bullish, very bullish on CBD. He's been taking it ever since. Not only that, he sells it as actually bakery. You want some good cannolis, ever at them. They're unbelievable, and the eclairs and cream puffs, but he sells CBD there. He said he sells about 30 bottles a month to people, all different people, from students with anxiety to cancer patients to vets, PTSD. And they claim it's the only thing that works for them. I guess some of the vets use a 5,000 milligram, and that's the only thing that really helps them. Tell us about what CBD you see. You're in the hemp market, so you're tracking hemp. That's what CBD is made from, hemp, not cannabis. Different kind of plant, I guess. Why don't you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, just to start out, hemp is cannabis, but it's legally defined as cannabis that has less than 0.3% THC. So it's basically a cousin of cannabis, a different variety with just a minuscule portion of THC. So no one's going to get intoxicated from hemp. But yeah, so there are, I don't even know how many varieties of high CBD hemp out there being grown in the US. It really began to boom after 2018. The Farm Bill, the Agricultural Appropriations Act, passed by the U.S. federal government, legalized hemp, and it also legalized CBD. Previously, CBD was a controlled substance, just like THC. And so, yeah, starting in 2019, you really saw that take off. We saw hemp production basically quadruple, I think, from 2018 to 2019. And the thing is, though, despite all of CBD's popularity, and it really is becoming almost a household item, it seems, like you mentioned, the industry got a little bit ahead of the demand, actually. And so what our Hemp Benchmarks division has seen was, with the big production boom in 2019, you had hemp acreage quadruple in the US. There are just loads and loads of extracted CBD out there. And the federal government hasn't quite figured out how to treat it yet. So sales channels are limited. So the FDA has said you're not technically allowed to add it to foods and beverages and sell it as a dietary supplement. They're sort of working through the parameters of what that might take to let that happen. So down the road, if those sales channels are opened up, if the FDA says that CBD can be marketed as a dietary supplement, it can be added to foods and beverages, you're going to see the big consumer packaged goods companies come in. You already have some sort of dipping their toes here and there, but that's when we think the market is really going to boom. But it's already quite a big industry. Sales estimates are all over the place, but for 2020, some analysts put retail CBD sales as high as $4 billion. Nationwide. We don't think they're quite that high, but we do think they're at least $1 billion here in the US.
I have a friend of mine, John Morrow. He owns a handful called Your CBD stores. They're, I believe, the biggest brick and mortar stores in the country. I think he said there's 650 stores out there. But he said, the CBD is helping people with addictive health, cravings, withdrawal symptoms, for people dealing with drug addiction, to other things like sleeping. And he said the business has been very, very good. And they're opening actually a new store up in Lake Placid, little town of Lake Placid. So,
oh, wow.
You think you said, they said 4 billion possibly in 2020. What do you think about 2021 or 2022 going up, further?
Well, we think it's going to expand, and something that we haven't really touched on, I guess, is of course the pandemic that's still with us, but obviously that arrived in 2020. And when we were looking at the markets, the pandemic really sort of slowed down CBD sales growth. You had a lot of retailers that had to close with the lockdowns, and so sales channels were disrupted. People were spending their disposable income on different things, or perhaps trying to tuck it away because of the uncertainty. But that being said, we have heard from people in the industry that they have seen sales start to pick up starting around late last year. And we think, with people getting increasingly vaccinated and fingers crossed, hopefully things going back to normal before too long, more people being employed and getting their steady paycheck and not having to worry about if their business is going to shut down, we see the growth resuming. And then, hopefully when the federal government sets out some concrete guidelines for CBD, it can just, keep going up from there.
Lastly, you see other states making cannabis illegal in the near terminal?
I mean, it seems it seems like it's going that way. You had, in addition to New York, New Jersey, you had Virginia recently, New Mexico, a smaller state, but the governor just signed a legalization bill there last week. And then, looking back to the election, which seems kind of long ago at this point for some reason, but the 2020 election, you had 4 different states, everywhere from South Dakota, and that was when New Jersey legalized as well. But you had, so-called red states, such as South Dakota legalize for recreational use. I mean, they're going through some challenges up there. The governor and some of the other state legislators are against it, but the voters are for it. And it really seems it really seems like the dam is breaking, and you're just going to see more and more states pushing forward with legal cannabis markets.
Yeah, those your CBD stores are opening new ones every day, so they're just
Absolutely
leaps and bounds. That's CBD, but I'm a big believer in CBD. I take CBD to sleep at night some nights, and I find it works great. And so it's great for the people that with the pain, though. They're instead of dealing with pharmaceuticals, painkillers, they can use CBD or even cannabis. It's a lot. Seems a lot better for them.
Yeah, I mean, those are things that the FDA and other groups are looking at right now. But yeah, the anecdotal evidence is very compelling. And, for some, CBD seems like it came overnight, but I think for people that have been in the industry for a long time, they'll remember the 2013 CNN special on medical marijuana with Sanjay Gupta, and he featured Charlotte Figi, who was a young woman, a young girl here in Colorado who had really terrible epilepsy, and CBD helped reduce her seizures, and that's actually the only FDA approved CBD drug right now is for those very rare severe childhood seizures, but it seems quite miraculous almost the way it was able to help young kids like that.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. I've got some friends who actually give it to their pets and helps them with different issues that your pet may have.
Yeah, that's a big potential market that people in the industry are definitely looking at.
Well, Adam, thank you very much for being with us. Really appreciate talking with you. Again, Adam Koh from Cannabis Benchmarks and New Leaf. Adam, have a great day, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Ed. It's been great.
Thanks. And remember, listeners, anyone out there has any questions for me about your 401k, your IRA, any investments you have, feel free to give me a call at 518-255-8854, or you can email me at edgardner@cutterco.com. Thanks, everyone, for listening to Money Nation.